At Columbia University's annual Donor Appreciation Gala, organizer Susan Williams directed Dimitri Kovalenko to the small donors table. "You'll be more comfortable here," she said with a smile. The check in Dimitri's pocket was worth $50 million, but nobody was taking him seriously. In the Grand Hall of Low Library, Columbia University's 2024 annual Donor Appreciation Gala was being held with full splendor. Under crystal chandeliers in the 300-year-old historic building, representatives of New York's most elite families had gathered. The Rockefeller family, Carnegie's, Astor's, and Wall Street's powerful names met at this prestigious event. Dimitri Kovalenko, 42 years old, had immigrated to the U.S. from Ukraine 15 years ago and was now a world-renowned entrepreneur and engineer in defense technologies. Founder and CEO of Kovalenko Defense Systems, one of the Pentagon's largest contractors, with offices in 23 countries, and a technology empire valued at $34 billion. But tonight, with his elegant Navy suit, slight Ukrainian accent, and modest demeanor, in the eyes of other donors, he was just in the foreign guest category. Susan Williams, 54 years old, director of Columbia's Development Office, 22 years in university fundraising. Vassar College graduate, lives on the Upper East Side, knows social circles very well. Expert at categorizing everyone by their background before they arrive. "Mr. Kovalenko," Susan greeted him with a professional but cold smile. "Welcome to Columbia's Donor Appreciation Evening." "Thank you for the invitation," Dimitri replied politely. Susan's eyes quickly assessed Dimitri. Mid-range suit, no recognizable luxury brand, slight accent, unfamiliar name. Probably a small donor, maybe $1,000 to $5,000 range. "Let me show you to your table." Susan directed him to a table at the very back of the hall. The Community Supporters section. The Community Supporters table was in the back corner of the hall. Other tables were classified as Platinum Circle, $1 million plus, Gold Benefactors, $500,000 plus, Silver Patrons, $100,000 plus. At Dimitri's table sat small business owners, middle-class professionals, and community volunteers. His table companions introduced themselves. Robert Chen, local dentist, $2,000 annual donation. Maria Gonzalez, public school teacher, $500 donation. David Park, small business owner, $1,500 donation. Jennifer Walsh, nonprofit worker, $300 donation. They were all sincere, hardworking people, but tonight they felt like the university's second-class donors. "So, Mr. Kovalenko," Robert asked, "what brings you to Columbia's donor circle?" "I believe in education's power to transform lives," Dimitri answered simply. "That's wonderful," Maria smiled. "How long have you been supporting the university?" "This is my first official donation," Dimitri admitted. His table companions received this confession with understanding. They too were proving themselves as small donors. Meanwhile, very different conversations were happening at the Platinum Circle tables. Richard Steinberg, hedge fund billionaire, was discussing donating a new business building to Columbia. Catherine Morrison, pharmaceutical heiress, was planning to increase her scholarship endowment. The average donation at these elite tables ranged from $2 to $5 million. During the gala's cocktail hour, the social hierarchy showed itself clearly. While platinum donors drank champagne in the special VIP area, community supporters received standard wine service in the main hall. While Dimitri was having a conversation about education funding with Maria Gonzalez, Susan Williams approached. "Mr. Kovalenko, I hope you're enjoying the evening." Susan's tone was patronizing. "Have you had a chance to look at our community giving brochures?" Susan held a Modest Giving Opportunities brochure, material containing donation options ranging from $100 to $5,000. "I've reviewed your materials," Dimitri replied politely. "Wonderful. Even small contributions make a meaningful difference." Susan emphasized the word small. "Every dollar counts in our mission." This conversation was being observed by luxury-clad donors from nearby tables. Richard Steinberg's wife, Patricia, whispered to her husband, "Who is that man with the accent? He seems out of place." "Probably one of the scholarship recipients or community outreach invitations," Richard replied dismissively. "They invite a few locals to show diversity." David Park, Dimitri's table partner, found these social dynamics uncomfortable. "You know," David quietly said to Dimitri, "I've been coming to these events for 3 years. They always treat the community donors like we're charity cases ourselves." Dimitri smiled diplomatically. Perhaps their perspective will change tonight. Columbia President Lee Bollinger took the stage to begin the evening's formal program. He spoke about the university's achievements, future plans, and the critical importance of the donor community. "Tonight we celebrate the generous spirit of our donor family," President Bollinger announced. "From our transformational major gifts to our community supporters' heartfelt contributions, every donation advances Columbia's mission." Next came the Development Office's statistics presentation. Susan Williams took the microphone to present the annual donation summary. "This year, we've raised $347 million from our incredible donor community. Our Platinum Circle members contributed $298 million, representing 86% of our total fundraising." The applause from the community supporters tables was noticeably quieter. They understood their heartfelt contributions amounted to less than 2% of total donations. "Now," Susan continued, "we'd like to recognize our top contributors for their extraordinary generosity." Platinum Circle members were called to the stage one by one to receive Crystal Awards. Richard Steinberg, $15 million donation. Catherine Morrison, $12 million donation. The Carnegie Foundation representative, $18 million donation. Community supporters applauded respectfully, knowing their $500 to $5,000 contributions wouldn't merit stage recognition. During dinner service, Dimitri's phone discreetly buzzed. Incoming text: "Pentagon procurement meeting confirmed for Monday. $4.7 billion defense contract finalization." Another message: "NATO Cybersecurity Summit attendance confirmed. Brussels, next week." As Dimitri put his phone on silent mode, table companions continued their casual conversation. "Mr. Kovalenko," Jennifer Walsh asked, "what kind of work do you do?" "Engineering and technology consulting," Dimitri replied modestly. "Oh, that's interesting," Robert Chen said. "For local companies?" "I work with various government agencies," Dimitri answered diplomatically. Maria leaned forward with interest. "Like the city or state government?" "Federal level primarily," Dimitri kept his response general. Meanwhile, very different conversations were happening at the nearby Platinum table. Richard Steinberg was boasting about his Pentagon contacts. "I have lunch with Defense Secretary Johnson monthly," Richard declared loudly enough for other tables to hear. "The defense contracting world is very exclusive. Only the biggest players get real access." Patricia Steinberg nodded approvingly. "Richard's company has $500 million in government contracts. It's not easy to break into that industry." Dimitri heard this conversation but didn't react. He didn't mention Kovalenko Defense Systems' $34 billion worth of active contracts with the Pentagon. President Bollinger returned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special announcement tonight, an unexpected gift that will transform Columbia's future." Anticipation was palpable in the hall. Platinum donors looked at each other, wondering who among them had made an additional surprise donation. "This evening, we received the largest single donation in Columbia University's history," President Bollinger continued, "a transformational gift that will establish new research facilities, fund thousands of scholarships, and position Columbia as the global leader in defense technology education." Excited murmurs rose from the community supporters tables. Major gift announcements were always inspiring, even when they couldn't personally contribute at that level. Susan Williams came on stage, her hands trembling with excitement. "The donor wishes to remain modest about this extraordinary generosity, but we must properly acknowledge this historic contribution." Richard Steinberg whispered to his wife, "Must be the Morgan family. They've been talking about a $25 million pledge." Catherine Morrison speculated, "Maybe it's the new tech billionaire from California everyone's been courting." President Bollinger opened the envelope and read the amount. $50 million. A collective gasp rose from the hall. $50 million was the largest single donation in Columbia's history. And now, President Bollinger continued, I'd like to invite our benefactor to the stage, Mr. Dimitri Kovalenko. Dead silence. At the community supporters table, Dimitri's table companions looked at him with shocked stares. Maria Gonzalez's wineglass fell from her hand. Robert Chen's mouth hung open. Dimitri calmly stood up, straightened his jacket, and began walking toward the stage. Panic and disbelief spread through the platinum circle tables. That's impossible, Richard Steinberg whispered harshly. That foreign guy from the back table? Susan Williams's face went completely white. She had relegated the evening's largest donor to the community supporters section based entirely on his accent and appearance. Patricia Morrison turned to her table companions. Who is this man? How did we not know about him? The 300 people in the audience watched Dimitri as he walked to the podium. His calm confidence, distinguished bearing, and natural authority suddenly became apparent to everyone present. President Bollinger welcomed Dimitri on stage and whispered, Mr. Kovalenko, we had no idea about your generous intention. We should have seated you with our major donors. That's quite all right, Dimitri replied graciously. I enjoyed meeting the community supporters. They remind me why education matters. Dimitri adjusted the microphone at the podium and began addressing the audience. Thank you, President Bollinger. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate this warm welcome. His voice carried natural authority. No longer the modest background figure, Dimitri commanded the room's complete attention. I came to America from Ukraine 15 years ago with $500 in a dream. American universities, including Columbia, gave me the education that transformed my life. The audience listened intently. The community supporters table beamed with pride for their table companion. Today, I am CEO of Kovalenko Defense Systems, a company that employs 47,000 people across 23 countries. We work closely with the Pentagon, NATO, and allied defense forces worldwide. Richard Steinberg's jaw dropped. Kovalenko Defense Systems was legendary in defense contracting, far larger than his own company. This $50 million donation establishes the Kovalenko Institute for Defense Technology at Columbia Engineering. We will train the next generation of cybersecurity experts, aerospace engineers, and technology innovators. A standing ovation began. All 300 people stood up, but energy levels were clearly different in different sections. Community supporters enthusiastically applauded their vindicated table companion. Platinum Circle members applauded politely, but with obvious embarrassment at their earlier dismissal. Susan Williams applauded mechanically, mentally calculating her career damage. At the reception, social dynamics completely reversed. Richard Steinberg approached Dimitri first. Mr. Kovalenko, I owe you an apology. I should have introduced myself earlier. No apology necessary, Dimitri replied graciously. I enjoyed observing before engaging. Patricia Morrison joined the conversation. Your company's reputation in defense technology is extraordinary. We'd love to learn more about your work. Perhaps, Dimitri said diplomatically, but tonight is about celebrating education, not business. Susan Williams finally approached, her professional smile strained. Mr. Kovalenko, I want to personally apologize for the seating confusion. We should have recognized your stature immediately. Ms. Williams, Dimitri replied kindly, your community supporters table was exactly where I belong tonight. Those teachers, small business owners, and community volunteers represent the heart of American philanthropy. He continued, they give generously from limited resources because they believe in something bigger than themselves. That's far more impressive than large donations from surplus wealth. Susan realized Dimitri wasn't just correcting her assumptions about donors. He was teaching a masterclass in values. President Bollinger joined their conversation. Mr. Kovalenko, your perspective on philanthropy is refreshing. Would you consider joining Columbia's Board of Trustees? I'd be honored, Dimitri replied, but I have one condition. Of course, anything. No more segregated seating based on donation size. Every supporter should be welcomed equally. 3 months later, Columbia University implemented the Kovalenko Protocol, integrated seating for all donors, regardless of contribution size. Susan Williams completed mandatory sensitivity training on donor relations and unconscious bias. She learned to recognize that generosity comes in many forms and backgrounds. Richard Steinberg's company eventually partnered with Kovalenko Defense Systems on a $2.8 billion NATO cybersecurity contract. Maria Gonzalez received a full scholarship to Columbia's Teachers College graduate program, funded by the Kovalenko Institute. Robert Chen was appointed to Columbia Dental School's Community Outreach Board. David Park's small business received a $500,000 microloan from the Kovalenko Entrepreneur Fund. Jennifer Walsh joined the Kovalenko Institute as Director of Community Relations. The community supporters who sat with Dimitri that evening all became lifelong advocates for inclusive philanthropy. Most importantly, Columbia's fundraising model changed permanently. Instead of segregating donors by wealth, events now celebrated the diversity of their supporter community. Dimitri Kovalenko never sat at a platinum circle table. He preferred community tables, where he met teachers, small business owners, and community volunteers whose passion for education matched his own. At the next year's gala, there were no VIP sections. Every donor sat together, creating conversations between hedge fund billionaires and public school teachers, pharmaceutical heiresses and nonprofit workers. Total fundraising increased by 34% because donors felt equally valued regardless of their contribution size. True generosity, Dimitri often reflected, isn't measured by the amount given, but by the sacrifice made and the love shown. Sometimes the person you seat in the back corner is the one who will rebuild your entire foundation. And sometimes the most foreign accent speaks the most American values: equality, generosity, and the power of education to transform lives.